The city streets glistened faintly under the morning drizzle, the soft hum of early traffic blending with distant chatter. Lara Benson adjusted the edge of her umbrella, her other hand clutching a small wicker basket brimming with freshly picked flowers. The blossoms were vibrant against the gray of the sidewalk, their subtle fragrance a sharp contrast to the damp, bustling urban air. Beside her, a small girl, Sophie, tugged gently at her coat, her wide eyes scanning the passers-by with innocent curiosity. Lara knelt briefly to arrange a bouquet, positioning the flowers to catch the attention of hurried pedestrians. She had been selling these flowers for weeks now, ever since circumstances forced her out of her comfortable life. Her career had crumbled unexpectedly, her savings depleted, and the responsibility of providing for Sophie, her sister's child after a tragic accident, fell squarely on her shoulders. Sophie's giggle broke through Lara's concentration. The little girl had spotted a man walking past, a stranger in a sharp suit, impeccably dressed, exuding a quiet confidence. Lara straightened and glanced over casually, expecting nothing more than a passing glance. But the stranger paused. His gaze lingered on the two of them, subtle recognition flickering across his eyes. Lara tightened her grip on the basket, sensing both curiosity and cautious tension in the way he observed them. She had learned to be wary of strangers. The world had taught her harsh lessons about trust and appearances. Sophie, oblivious to the weight of adult caution, waved energetically. "Hello, mister," she chirped, her voice innocent and melodic. The man's lips quirked into a faint, unreadable smile, and he stopped, his attention fully captured by the child's candid presence. Lara's chest tightened. She forced a polite smile, stepping slightly in front of Sophie as if to shield her from potential intrusion. "Good morning," she said cautiously, her tone friendly but guarded. "Would you like to buy some flowers?" The man's eyes flickered down to the basket briefly, then back up, studying Lara with a sharp, perceptive gaze. "I don't need flowers," he said smoothly, his voice calm yet carrying subtle authority. There was something in the way he spoke, the controlled timbre and precision, that made Lara pause. Before she could respond, Sophie, curious and unfiltered, piped up excitedly. "Are you my dad?" The words hung in the air. Lara froze, a jolt of shock and disbelief washing over her. The stranger blinked, clearly taken aback, his eyes widening in a fleeting moment of surprise. Lara's mind raced. Had she misheard? Surely a man of this composure couldn't be. The stranger knelt slightly to meet Sophie's eye level, his expression shifting subtly from surprise to intense focus. Who said that?" he asked, voice low and controlled, though there was a hint of astonishment under the surface. Lara's grip on Sophie tightened instinctively. She just said it," Lara stammered, trying to maintain calm while masking the shock swirling inside her. "She's a child. She doesn't know what she's saying." But the stranger's gaze, sharp and discerning, didn't waver. He studied both Lara and the child, his posture composed, yet there was a flicker of curiosity and recognition, as if a distant memory or hidden connection was surfacing. Lara felt a chill run down her spine. There was something more in his eyes than just surprise. Something calculated, intentional, and piercingly aware. Sophie, unaware of the tension, giggled and waved her small hand. "I like you," she exclaimed, pointing at him. Lara's cheeks flushed. She had tried to teach the girl caution, but innocence rarely heeds adult warnings. The man finally stood, straightening in his suit, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile crossed his face. "Interesting," he murmured under his breath, his gaze lingering on Lara with a subtle intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Very interesting." Lara felt a mixture of fear, curiosity, and something she couldn't quite name. The encounter that began as an ordinary morning on a rainy city street had suddenly become charged with tension, mystery, and the faint stirrings of destiny. The man, who exuded control, authority, and unexpected warmth, had somehow intersected their lives in a way that could not be ignored. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Cars passed by, raindrops fell gently on the umbrella, and pedestrians moved in a blur. But in that small corner of the city, 3 lives had collided. One child's innocent words, one woman's resilience, and one man's quiet power. The day, and perhaps their futures, would never be the same again. The man finally took a step back, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes betrayed something. Recognition, intrigue, a hint of connection. Lara sensed it immediately. The subtle tension in the air told her that this was no ordinary passerby. There was purpose here, observation, and a story unfolding that she could not yet comprehend. "Let's go, Sophie," Lara whispered, her voice steadying as she guided the child away from the street. But even as they walked, she felt the stranger's gaze following them, a calm, deliberate, yet undeniably present attention that left a lingering sense of suspense and anticipation. The morning mist hung in the air, and Lara realized that the small act of her life, selling flowers to survive, caring for a child, and simply existing with integrity, had intersected with someone who would change everything. The stranger's presence promised questions, revelations, and a twist of fate that neither she nor Sophie could anticipate. And somewhere in the depths of his observing eyes, Lara knew this encounter was only the beginning, a cinematic collision of destiny, past mistakes, and future possibilities. The city streets were buzzing with activity, but Lara Benson's focus was entirely on keeping Sophie close and arranging the small bouquets neatly in her basket. The child skipped lightly beside her, oblivious to the careful calculations Lara made to maximize visibility and appeal to potential customers. Every passerby was a potential client, and yet Lara's attention kept drifting back to the stranger she had seen earlier, the one the child had called Dad. For the briefest moment, she had felt a jolt of shock, disbelief, and subtle fear. Who was he? Why had he lingered? Lara had decided to ignore the encounter, assuming it was coincidence. Yet the memory lingered in the back of her mind, a subtle reminder that the world had a way of creating unexpected intersections. Across the street, a black luxury car slowed near the corner, and the window rolled down slightly. A well-dressed man stepped out. Jared Klein, the same stranger, now clearly confident, deliberate, and commanding. His eyes scanned the street with precision, and then he caught sight of Lara and Sophie. Lara stiffened, instinctively shielding Sophie slightly with her body. "Stay close to me," she murmured softly, her voice tinged with caution. She wasn't sure what to expect. Was he a threat? A wealthy passerby interested in buying flowers? Or something else entirely? Jared took a step forward, his gaze fixed on the two of them. "Excuse me," he called out, voice calm and measured. "I think we need to talk." Lara froze, unsure whether to retreat or confront. Sophie tugged at her hand, oblivious to the tension. "Who is he, Mom?" the child asked innocently, looking up at her with wide, trusting eyes. Lara swallowed, masking her unease. "Someone we'll see," she replied cautiously, adjusting the basket. Jared approached slowly, careful not to startle them. "I believe I need to clarify something," he said quietly, his tone calm, yet carrying subtle authority. "I am Jared Klein, CEO of Holstead Enterprises. And I think there's been a misunderstanding about yesterday, about your child's remark." Lara's eyes widened, shock mingling with disbelief. "Wait, you, CEO. You're him," she whispered, incredulous. "The stranger, the bus?" Jared nodded, his expression unreadable but calm. "Yes, and I need to understand the context of what happened yesterday, why my attention was drawn, and who this little girl is." Sophie, oblivious to the tension, giggled and waved at him again. "Hi, mister," she exclaimed. Lara felt her chest tighten, not just from fear but from the surreal absurdity of the moment. "I see now," Jared said quietly, kneeling slightly to meet Sophie's eye level. "You were right to be cautious, but I assure you I mean no harm. I just need clarity. Who is this child, and why did she call me Dad?" Lara took a deep breath. "She's my niece," she said carefully. "I'm her guardian. I've been raising her since her parents passed. She sometimes mistakes strangers for people she trusts." Jared's gaze softened, though his analytical edge remained. "I see. That explains the misunderstanding. But there's something familiar about her. And about you. I feel as if fate has arranged this encounter, and I need to understand why. Lara hesitated, uncertainty clouding her composure. She didn't know if she could trust this man, even though his demeanor suggested honesty. Look, Mr. Klein. I don't know what to say. Yesterday was just coincidence. I didn't mean anything by it. Jared shook his head subtly, a faint, thoughtful smile forming. Coincidence rarely explains everything. Something about your presence, your child, and your actions stands out. I need to meet with you formally, understanding fully what's happening and why. Lara's mind raced. A formal meeting with a CEO. She was accustomed to managing her own affairs, protecting Sophie, and avoiding entanglements with strangers, especially powerful men. Yet she felt a flicker of curiosity, and perhaps cautious hope. Okay, she said slowly. I'll meet. But I'm not sure what you expect me to explain. Nothing except the truth, Jared replied, his eyes holding hers steadily. And perhaps we can start anew, with clarity and understanding. The rain had lightened, leaving reflections of city lights glimmering on the wet asphalt. Lara looked down at Sophie, whose tiny hand was still clutching hers. The child's innocence, the stranger's unexpected recognition, and the surreal circumstances created a tension that was both cinematic and emotionally charged. As they walked toward a nearby cafe to talk more privately, Lara realized that her life, carefully constructed to protect Sophie and herself, was about to intersect with a man whose influence, awareness, and authority could change everything. The encounter that began with a simple, accidental act had escalated into a pivotal moment. The stranger from the rain, now revealed as a billionaire CEO, had observed her actions, recognized her character, and created a connection neither of them fully understood yet. And in that quiet moment, with Sophie skipping ahead and Jared following at a measured distance, Lara felt a mixture of apprehension, curiosity, and a strange sense of destiny. Something had shifted. The day that began as ordinary had now become charged with possibility, suspense, and the first hints of a story that would change their lives forever. The cafe's soft interior contrasted sharply with the chill and drizzle outside. Lara Benson led Sophie through the door, her mind racing with a mixture of caution and curiosity. The encounter on the street had been surreal enough, the child calling the stranger Dad by mistake. And now the stranger, revealed as Jared Klein, billionaire CEO, had insisted on meeting them formally. Lara's instinct was protective. She had spent years safeguarding Sophie and herself from the unpredictability of strangers, power, and authority. Jared approached, his calm and confident demeanor unwavering, yet his eyes betrayed a hint of astonishment and intrigue. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," he said, voice steady, composed, carrying subtle authority. "I want to understand more about your situation, and if you're willing to discuss an opportunity." Lara stiffened slightly, instinctively moving a step between him and Sophie. "I'm not sure what opportunity you mean," she said cautiously. "We're just trying to get by." Jared smiled faintly, recognizing her wariness. "I understand. And I assure you there's no intention to intimidate. But I couldn't ignore what I observed yesterday, or the courage, resourcefulness, and care you demonstrated." Sophie tugged at Lara's sleeve, oblivious to the tension. "He's nice, Mom," she whispered. Lara's chest tightened. The child's innocence both softened the moment and reminded Lara of the stakes. "Your child seems extraordinary," Jared said, leaning slightly forward, his gaze softening as he observed Sophie. "And it's clear that you've been doing everything in your power to care for her." Lara felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "I do what I can," she murmured. "It's not easy, but I won't let her suffer." Jared nodded, expression unreadable but attentive. "I can see that. And it's precisely why I wanted to meet with you in a quiet setting. I need to understand your challenges, your priorities, and how best I might assist, or at least ensure that your talent and dedication aren't overlooked." Lara's curiosity flickered despite her caution. "Assist? How?" "By giving you the opportunity to be recognized. Jared replied, voice calm yet measured. You've demonstrated resilience, intelligence, and integrity, all qualities that are rare and highly valuable. But it's not just about talent. It's about character, and I've observed yours. The air between them grew taut, charged with unspoken tension. Lara's mind raced with questions. Why him? Why now? Was this some test? Or had fate truly brought them together in this improbable sequence of events? Jared's gaze returned to her, piercing yet soft. I need to know something, he said, lowering his voice. Was there ever anyone else in your life who recognized your abilities, who appreciated your integrity? Lara hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly, recalling the betrayal of her previous employer, the ex-boss who had fired her unfairly. Not in recent years, she admitted quietly. Most people only see what they want, not the effort or integrity behind it. Jared nodded slowly, processing her words. I see. That is exactly why I need to ensure that your talent isn't wasted. And that recognition, once delayed, is finally given. Lara studied him carefully, noticing the sincerity in his gaze. Something about his tone, posture, and precise words conveyed more than mere professional evaluation. It suggested genuine interest in her character, her life, and perhaps even the well-being of Sophie. Sophie, oblivious to the tension, began arranging a small bouquet from the basket. Look, Mom. Flowers! She exclaimed cheerfully. Lara couldn't help but smile faintly, the child's innocence providing a brief reprieve from the high-stakes tension. Jared's eyes followed Sophie's movements, and he allowed a small, approving smile to touch his face. She's remarkable, he said quietly. And it's clear why you're protective. That sense of responsibility and care is rare, and it tells me a lot about you, Lara. Lara blinked, taken aback by the insight in his observation. You really mean that? She asked cautiously, uncertain if she could trust someone who held so much power over potential opportunities. Jared nodded, his gaze steady. I do. And I intend to ensure that your abilities, your dedication, and your integrity are acknowledged properly. Not through empty words, but through tangible opportunity. A subtle shift occurred in the room. The power dynamic had changed. The stranger from yesterday, initially perceived as distant or detached, now held influence, recognition, and the ability to impact Lara's life meaningfully. Yet his demeanor was careful, measured, commanding respect without forcing compliance, showing interest without pressure. Lara felt a mixture of relief, curiosity, and cautious optimism. She realized that the moment was not just about recognition or opportunity. It was about trust, about seeing someone value what truly mattered. Her character, her dedication to Sophie, and her resilience in the face of adversity. Jared leaned back slightly, a calm, calculating presence. Tomorrow I want you to come by my office. We'll discuss a position that aligns with your talent and commitment. And perhaps, in that conversation, I can clarify why yesterday's moment stood out to me so profoundly. Lara nodded slowly, a mixture of apprehension and anticipation coursing through her. She could not yet understand the full implications of his words, but she sensed that her life, and Sophie's, was on the cusp of transformation. The city outside shimmered with the reflection of streetlights on wet pavement. Lara guided Sophie toward the cafe exit, casting a final glance at Jared, whose eyes held a quiet intensity and an unspoken promise. The encounter that had begun as an ordinary morning on a rainy street had evolved into a cinematic convergence of fate, recognition, and opportunity, one that would alter their lives in ways neither could yet comprehend. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the half-clouded sky, casting muted reflections across the wet city pavement. Lara Benson sat on a low bench beside Sophie, who was busy arranging a small bouquet from the flowers they had unsold today. The street had quieted somewhat. Pedestrians were fewer, and the rhythm of the city had slowed. Yet Lara's mind raced, caught between curiosity, caution, and the strange ripple caused by the man who had observed them earlier, the one Sophie had mistakenly called Dad. Jared Klein approached deliberately, his footsteps echoing softly against the stone pavement. He carried himself with the calm, deliberate confidence of a man accustomed to authority, yet there was a subtle warmth in his expression, a recognition of the human vulnerability he now observed. "Lara," he began, his tone steady but soft, "thank you for meeting me again. I wanted to ensure there was no misunderstanding and to talk in a quieter, more private context." Lara straightened, her body tense but composed. "I'm not sure what you mean," she replied cautiously, keeping Sophie close to her side. "Yesterday was unusual enough. I'm not sure why you're following up." Jared paused, his gaze briefly drifting to Sophie, who was humming as she tied a ribbon around a small bundle of flowers. "Because what I observed yesterday was significant. Your actions, the way you protect her, the patience and kindness you displayed, it all speaks volumes about you. And I want to understand more about who you are." Lara's lips pressed into a thin line. She had spent years protecting herself and Sophie from strangers, from well-meaning interference and potential threats. Yet something about Jared's composure, the sincerity in his tone, and the intensity of his gaze suggested a depth that both intrigued and unnerved her. "You mean, you're not here to lecture me?" Lara asked cautiously, her voice soft but firm. "Not at all," Jared said. He extended a hand slightly, palm open in a gesture of honesty and peace. "I'm here to observe, to understand, and to ensure that no one mistakes courage and integrity for recklessness." Lara felt a small flicker of relief but remained wary. She had learned to measure trust carefully. "And what do you want to understand exactly?" she asked, glancing down at Sophie. "Why you care," Jared replied simply. "Why you protect her with such instinctive dedication. And perhaps how your life has led you to this point." Lara hesitated. The truth was heavy. Years of struggle, loss, and sacrifice had shaped her into someone cautious, resourceful, and fiercely protective. She opened her mouth to explain, but Jared held up a hand gently. "I don't want the full story right now," he said quietly. "I want a glimpse, just enough to understand the essence of what I observed yesterday. And I promise, nothing I do will compromise your trust or your safety." The sincerity in his voice softened Lara's stance slightly. She took a deep breath, then began to speak, choosing her words carefully, revealing only what she could comfortably share. "Sophie, she's my niece. I've been raising her since her parents passed. Selling flowers, managing what I can. It's not easy. But she deserves care, love, and protection." Jared listened intently, his expression neutral yet attentive. "I see," he said finally. "Your dedication, your courage, and your patience. They are remarkable. And it's clear that you act not out of obligation but out of instinct and genuine care." Lara's chest tightened, a mixture of pride and uncertainty flooding her senses. "Why does that matter to you?" she asked, her voice cautious, almost defensive. "Because people with that instinct, that integrity, are rare," Jared said softly, stepping a bit closer but maintaining respectful distance. "And it is precisely why I felt compelled to find out who you are. Not as a stranger, not as a passerby, but as someone whose character deserves recognition." Sophie, sensing the tension yet unaware of the subtle undercurrents, handed Jared a small daisy from her bouquet. "For you," she said brightly. Jared's eyes softened, and he knelt slightly to meet the child's gaze. "Thank you," he said, his voice low and warm. "I'll treasure it." Lara's heart swelled. There was a humanizing depth in him she hadn't expected. He wasn't just observing. He was acknowledging, respecting, and engaging with both her and Sophie genuinely. Then came the twist. Jared's gaze lingered on a particular detail, a small pendant around Sophie's neck, a keepsake from her parents. His eyes widened subtly, recognition flickering. "Where did this come from?" he asked quietly, leaning closer, not to intrude, but to see the pendant more clearly. Lara instinctively pulled Sophie closer. "It belonged to her mother." "Why do you ask?" Jared's expression hardened, and then softened in a complex mix. "It's familiar. I haven't seen this in years. There's a story here, isn't there?" Lara glanced at him, unsure whether to trust him with the truth. She had spent so long protecting Sophie from surprises and hidden intentions, yet there was something compelling in the intensity of Jared's presence. "Yes, but it's complicated," she admitted cautiously. Jared nodded slowly, reading the hesitance in her eyes. "I understand. And I don't intend to force it. I just need to ensure that both of you are safe, and perhaps I need to understand the connection that brought us together yesterday." The street outside glimmered with puddles reflecting the fading daylight. The moment was cinematic, a perfect mix of tension, suspense, and burgeoning connection. Lara realized that the encounter, which had begun as a seemingly random interaction, had evolved into something deeply significant. She looked at Sophie, then back at Jared. "I suppose, if you're willing to listen, I can tell you a little," she said softly. Jared's faint, approving smile indicated he would wait patiently. "I'm willing," he said quietly. And in that delicate pause, Lara sensed the story unfolding, a tale of past lives, hidden connections, and unforeseen consequences. The child's innocent words had sparked a chain reaction, one that would intertwine their fates in ways none of them could yet comprehend. The city noises faded to a soft hum, leaving only the three of them in a moment charged with suspense, trust, and subtle anticipation. Lara realized that today was not just about recognition or survival. It was about understanding, connection, and the unfolding narrative of a life intersected by fate, courage, and unexpected revelation. The evening settled over the city, casting soft reflections across rain-slicked streets. Lara Benson walked with Sophie through the quiet neighborhood, her thoughts still swirling from the afternoon's unexpected encounter. The man who had appeared at the bus stop, the stranger her niece had mistakenly called Dad, was no ordinary passerby. His presence, calm authority, and keen observation had already unsettled and intrigued her. Lara guided Sophie toward the small apartment building where they lived, but as she rounded a corner, she saw him waiting. Jared Klein, impeccably dressed, calm and composed, yet a subtle warmth in his expression hinted at the understanding that had been forming throughout their encounter. "Lara," he began, voice even, measured, yet carrying weight, "I hope you'll forgive my persistence. Yesterday's incident. It left me curious, intrigued, and frankly concerned for both you and Sophie." Lara's lips pressed into a line, a mixture of caution and anticipation. "I'm not sure what you want from us," she said softly, still holding Sophie's hand tightly. "I want to ensure that no one underestimates your resilience, intelligence, or dedication," Jared replied. His gaze softened slightly, flicking down to Sophie. "And that this child, who is clearly extraordinary, is protected, supported, and recognized for her own potential." Sophie's eyes lit up at the sound of his voice, and she waved shyly. Jared smiled faintly, kneeling slightly to her level. "You've done well to stay strong, little one," he said warmly. Sophie giggled, oblivious to the complexity of the adult interaction. Lara's chest tightened as she processed his words. The stranger, now a man of influence and power, was not only aware of her struggles but had intentions that seemed protective rather than intrusive. There was a weight to his presence, a responsibility he seemed willing to shoulder silently. "I should explain," Jared continued, standing and fixing Lara with a steady gaze. "I recognized you immediately, not just by voice but by the care, composure, and integrity in your actions. The moment Sophie called me Dad, I realized there was a connection I needed to explore." Lara froze. "Connection?" she whispered, unsure how much to reveal. "Yes," Jared replied softly, his tone calm, persuasive, yet respectful. "You've been operating in a world that has often overlooked your skill and care, and yet your instincts, character, and presence are unmistakable. I intend to correct that in whatever way I can." For a long moment, silence enveloped them, punctuated by the faint city sounds outside. Lara realized the gravity of the situation. The stranger, the CEO, the man whose curiosity and authority could change her life, was offering validation, protection, and an opportunity she hadn't dared to imagine. Jared reached into his coat pocket and produced a small envelope. "I'd like you to consider this," he said. "It's an opportunity, Something that recognizes your work, your perseverance, and your integrity. It's not just for you, but for Sophie as well. Lara hesitated, taking the envelope cautiously. Inside was a letter detailing support for her career, opportunities for advancement, and resources to ensure Sophie's well-being. An acknowledgement of both her professional skill and the care she had demonstrated as a guardian. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She had never expected that a single act of kindness, the bus fare, a gesture of generosity, would ripple into recognition and tangible support. Yet here it was. Validation, opportunity, and hope, all intertwined in the deliberate and calculated generosity of Jared Klein. I don't know what to say, Lara whispered, her voice quivering slightly. You don't need to say anything, Jared replied gently. What matters is that you understand your value, your abilities, and that recognition is now being given where it was long overdue. A subtle warmth filled the air between them. The professional and personal stakes had merged. The encounter had begun with a simple mistake from a child and had evolved into a cinematic, life-altering recognition of character, resilience, and integrity. Sophie tugged at Lara's hand. "Mom, he's nice," she said simply. Lara smiled faintly, realizing that sometimes, innocence sees what adults overcomplicate. Jared glanced at the child, then back at Lara, and his expression softened further. "You've done remarkable work. Every day unseen and unrecognized. Ends today. From now on, your efforts will be acknowledged, respected, and supported." Lara's chest swelled with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a faint thrill of possibility. The stranger had become someone who not only observed but recognized, valued, and elevated her. The day that began with rain, a bus, and a child's mistaken words had culminated in validation, trust, and the first hint of a bond that might grow into something deeper. You really mean all this?" Lara asked softly, her voice betraying a mix of disbelief and hope. Jared nodded. "I do. And more importantly, I intend to ensure it continues. You and Sophie deserve nothing less than recognition, support, and opportunity." The city lights reflected off wet pavement as the three of them, Lara, Sophie, and Jared, stood together. The tension of fear and uncertainty had dissolved, replaced by trust, validation, and the subtle spark of connection. Lara realized that her life, which had seemed constrained by circumstance and betrayal, was now opening into a realm of possibility, security, and hope. The encounter concluded with no dramatic declarations, no overt gestures of romance, just a quiet acknowledgement of integrity, the promise of opportunity, and the hint of a story yet to unfold. A cinematic pause lingered, capturing the subtle power of human connection, the reward of perseverance, and the delicate beginnings of trust, respect, and perhaps slow-burning affection. As they walked toward a nearby taxi, preparing to return home, Lara glanced at Jared one last time. His eyes met hers, steady, sincere, and filled with unspoken recognition. The encounter had been brief, but the impact was monumental. An ordinary day transformed into a narrative of destiny, trust, and the unforeseen consequences of kindness. For Lara and Sophie, life had shifted irrevocably. The stranger had not only observed their struggle but had intervened in a way that balanced authority, respect, and subtle guidance. The rain-soaked streets of yesterday had given way to the reflective, calm glow of recognition and the quiet promise of a brighter future. And somewhere in that cityscape, a billionaire CEO, a resilient woman, and a child whose innocence had sparked everything, were now connected by the delicate threads of fate, compassion, and cinematic destiny.